In the entire history of Africa, there are a few names that they echo with the force of a war drum. And one of the most powerful for sure is Shaka Zulu. He was a military genius, a nation builder, and yeah, a figure of immense power and controversy. His shadow, it still stretches across the southern part of the continent today. But here's the thing, this empire wasn't just handed to him. It wasn't built on some royal inheritance. It was literally forged in the fire of rejection by a man who took being an outcast and turned it into the fuel for his incredible ambition. This is that story. Because really, to understand the king he became, you first have to understand the boy who was completely cast aside. His story doesn't start with the crown, but with a stigma. He was born around 1787, and his father was Senzagahona, the chief of what was then a pretty small Zulu clan. But Shaka's parentage was considered illegitimate, and that one fact would pretty much define his entire childhood. This whole experience really laid the foundation for his life's motivation. He was banished, kicked out of his home, along with his mother, Nandi, and they were forced into exile. They eventually found refuge with a powerful tribe called them Tetwa, and it was there, as a refugee, that he would learn the ways of a warrior. And let me tell you, he was a very, very quick study. When his father died back in 1816, Shaka didn't just wait around for an invitation to come home. No way. Backed by his powerful mentor from the Ntetwa, he returned, overthrew his own half-brother, and seized control of the very clan that had kicked him out. It was swift, it was decisive, and it was brutal. Okay, so taking the throne, that's one thing, but keeping it and actually building something from it, well, that required a revolution. And that revolution was going to happen on the battlefield. You see, before Shaka, warfare in that region was almost ceremonial. It was all about long-range throwing spears and these attack and retreat kinds of tactics. Shaka looked at this and just saw inefficiency. His philosophy was way simpler and, frankly, terrifying: getting close and completely annihilate the enemy. He changed the entire concept of war. And his primary tool for this new idea was a weapon he basically designed himself, the iklwa. He got rid of the light throwing spear and replaced it with this short, stabbing spear. It was a simple change, but it had these profound consequences. It forced his warriors into bloody, up-close combat where there was no backing down. Now, to go along with this super aggressive new weapon, he also brought in a larger, heavier shield. This was key. It allowed his warriors to close the distance, block the enemy's throwing spears, and get right into range to use that deadly iklwa. It was the perfect 1-2 punch of offense and defense. But his tactical genius was really on full display with his legendary Horns of the Bull formation. Here's how it worked. The chest, that's the main force, would slam into the enemy head-on, just pinning them in place. Then the horns, these were faster, more mobile units, would sweep around the sides, encircle the enemy, and just crush them. It was a strategy that proved to be almost unstoppable. So, with a revolutionary army and these devastating new tactics, what did Shaka actually build? He built an empire, the Zulu Kingdom. And Shaka used this new war machine to absolutely devastating effect. See, when his mentor was killed by a rival chief named Zwaid, it created this big power vacuum. Shaka seized that opportunity. He united a bunch of different forces and defeated Zwaid in a brutal civil war. From there, he just started this relentless campaign, absorbing clan after clan into his growing empire. And the results? I mean, they were absolutely staggering. Under his reign, the territory controlled by the Zulus expanded by about 12 times. He took a small, pretty insignificant clan and transformed it into the most dominant power in all of southern Africa. His rise was just meteoric. Think about it. He becomes chief in 1816. Just a few years later, he comes out on top of a massive civil war. And by 1824, his power was so secure that he even let European traders set up a port in his territory, a little settlement that would one day become the city of Durban. But you know how these things often go. Empires that are built on violence and fear tend to have violent and fearful endings. And Shaka's was no exception. To really understand his end, we have to look at the man himself. He was known to be strong, muscular, but his rivals often described him as ugly, pointing out his large nose and prominent forehead. Some reports even claimed he had a speech impediment. It really paints a picture of a much more complex and maybe even deeply insecure man.
There's this one fascinating little anecdote that gives you a glimpse of this. He once joked to a friend, a guy named Magaye, that he could never execute him because people would just assume it was out of envy for Magaya's good looks. It shows this flicker of humor and self-awareness, even in the middle of all the brutality of his rule. But in the end, that brutality came back to him. In 1828, the very man who had seized power from his half-brother was murdered by two of his other half-brothers. The cycle of violence that he perfected came right back around to claim him.
So, how do we remember him? Was he a visionary who forged a nation from nothing? Or was he a brutal tyrant who built an empire purely on fear? His legacy is its own kind of battlefield, and it forces us to ask a really tough question. Can the architect of a nation ever truly be separated from the violence of its creation?